He lost everything. How did this happen? He built an empire: construction, insurance, manufacturing. At one point, it was worth roughly $6 billion. Photo albums, ribbon cuttings, town squares named after the family. The camera lingers on a ledger. One line is circled. The voice says, one position would change everything. He made a choice. He bought a near 28% effective stake in a single bank. He did it with contracts for difference. CFDs are bets, big bets. They let you control stock like an owner without paying the price up front. They also bring huge leverage. They are opaque. They sit off the balance sheet. They carry one counterparty risk: the broker. The position grew fast. Prices rose. Headlines followed. He appeared to have control without the cost. The dynasty celebrated. Jobs were secure. Charities got big donations. Local teams kept their sponsors. Prestige followed. People felt safe. A new risk entered the plot: concentration. He had almost everything tied to one bank. The family fortune sat on paper, not in vaults. It depended on one broker staying solvent. It depended on markets staying calm. Another decision followed. To hide the exposure and to meet margin pressure, bank loans were arranged. They were secret. Investigators later called the web around those loans the golden circle. Loans flowed through linked accounts. Collateral was shifted. Some transfers looked designed to mask the true risk. The loans were structured in ways that kept the bets from public view. That secrecy was a second gamble. Momentum built. For a while, the numbers looked good. The bank's shares rallied. The stake was large enough to influence decisions. The public saw power, not fragility. The family used the sway to secure deals. New projects were announced. Critics were quiet. Friends were loyal. Those around him made choices based on that apparent strength. But warning signs appeared. First, small margin calls, then larger ones. Counterparties increased their demands. Private letters landed on desks. Creditors quietly moved. Regulators had rules that did not catch CFD exposure in time. Documents show a timeline of rising exposure. A margin notice is frozen on screen. The narrator asks, if the counterparty walked, what would be left? A new risk materialized. The broker was thinly capitalized. It had its own problems. When the bank's name slipped, the broker tightened. The broker called the margin. That call was the tipping point. The turning point was sudden. The bank's shares fell. The market cried uncertainty. The call came. Positions had to be closed. Forced sales hit the market. Prices plunged. Paper wealth became realized losses. Legal maneuvers followed. Emergency asset transfers were made. Some moves later became the basis for criminal charges. Prosecutors alleged asset stripping. Courts later found wrongdoing. The founder went to jail. Consequences spread wider than the family account. The dynasty imploded. Companies were sold at fire sale prices. Suppliers went unpaid. Workers lost jobs. Town festivals lost their sponsor. A country watched a private gamble become a public problem. The state stepped in. Debt guarantees and settlements were negotiated. Citizens were told the hole had to be filled. A 2% national levy was imposed to help plug the gap. Ordinary taxpayers felt the cost. People who had never met the family paid for a mistake made at the top. Political anger rose. Questions about who knew what and when filled headlines. Human stories thread through the numbers. A factory foreman who lost his pension. A small supplier who took a 40% hit. School bursaries that vanished. A family who counted on seasonal jobs. On camera, they list the months they lost income. Faces linger on empty seats in community halls. The film returns to the ledger and the circled line. The voice asks again, who pays when private bets become public debt? A new consequence surfaces. Legal judgments and bankruptcies tied up assets for years. Recovery efforts fetched some value, but much was gone. Prison sentences were handed down. Financial penalties drained what remained. The dynasty's balance sheets eroded. The country reformed some banking rules. Regulators promised better oversight. But the scars stayed. A forensic economist explains in plain terms, one concentrated leveraged position creates a multiplier of risk. Leverage multiplies losses. Counterparty failure converts unrealized paper losses into real write-downs. Secret loans shift risk, but do not erase it. When assets are forced to sell, prices collapse. When legal actions follow, the cost grows. Private losses become public obligations when the system needs backstop. New decisions continued to worsen the outcome. Management choices to push for rescue deals. Lawyers choosing aggressive defenses. Regulators choosing slow probes. Each choice had a cost. Each delay turned a recoverable problem into a systemic crisis. Midpoint. Call to action. For the primary documents, timelines, and the full forensic file, visit our site and review the evidence yourself. The forensic trail is clear. The CFDs created exposure beyond what the balance sheet showed. The broker was the weak link. The secret loans hid that link until it was too late. When the bank fell, the concentrated stake collapsed. Forced sales fed the downward spiral. Legal liabilities and alleged asset stripping drained estate value. The public was left covering systemic risk. The 2% levy was the arithmetic of that transfer. New risk emerges in the aftermath. The next billionaire could hide risk the same way. New decision points loom in boardrooms and regulatory halls. Should derivatives be off the balance sheet? Should large individual positions be reported? Who watches the watchers? The human impact continues. Towns rebuild slowly. Pensions are smaller. Trust in institutions is weaker. Political reforms have started. New rules limit certain leverage. Reporting standards were tightened, but loopholes remain. A final piece of forensic economics ties the story together. Concentration plus leverage, plus counterparty opacity, plus secret financing equals a conversion formula. It turns private wealth into public liability when the counterparty fails and legal claims arise. Each element matters. Remove one, and the collapse might not happen. But together, they act like a fuse. The last scenes are simple. A courtroom, a closed factory gate, a family album with blank pages. The ledger with the circled line sits under a lamp. The narrator states the lesson plainly. Transparency matters. Limits matter. Timely regulation matters. Families must diversify. Boards must ask the hard questions. Regulators must see beyond headline wealth. Final call to action. Learn more. Demand clear rules. Insist on transparency. The documents are public. Read them. Hold leaders to account. A dynasty built generations in. It was destroyed in months. A country was left to pick up the bill. How did one secret position cost billions and reshape a nation? The ledger shows the answer. The margin call closed the book.